Hello, I'm very excited to welcome you all to this Team Norway webinar on the state of GovTech in the UK and in Norway. My name is Hilde Ukerberg and I'm Head of Innovation Norway in the UK and Ireland. This is the first event in a series that we will do on GovTech to initiate new partnerships in this sector between our two countries. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with Vegge Strømmen, Norway's ambassador to the UK. Why should businesses pay attention to GovTech and why is it important for Team Norway?
So the GovTech market is estimated to be worth $400 billion globally. And according to Public, that we will hear from here today, the UK GovTech market will reach £20 billion by 2025. The key drivers for this growth are new technologies such as artificial intelligence and blockchain that are transforming the way governments are functioning and interacting with their citizens.
What is the potential in the UK and in Norway to grow this sector?
Well, the UK and Norway both have a very strong public sector with a good level of trust between the government and its citizens, and those are very important pillars to drive GovTech growth. However, as always, implementing digital technologies in our public services requires the right tools to protect the privacy and security of citizens and their personal data. It is a very complex task that involves both technological and ethical consideration to be successful.
Speaking on working together, the UK and Norway recently signed a new free trade agreement. Ambassador, could you tell us a bit more about this agreement and what it means for Norwegian companies?
On the 8th of July, Norway and the UK entered a new free trade agreement, which marked an important milestone in our relationship. Trade and market access are crucial for a small open economy like Norway's. Today, a total of 22% of all Norwegian exports go to the UK, and I'm very excited by the fact that the new agreement gives Norwegian contractors greater access to public procurements here in the UK than is provided for under the free trade agreement between the EU and the UK.
On that note, I'm delighted to introduce you to our first industry expert, Johnny Gill from Public. First, Johnny is going to share his thoughts on the state of GovTech in the UK and the most urgent challenges faced by the UK in the digital public services. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm Johnny. I'm from a company called Public, which is a GovTech, a venture and transformation firm based in Berlin and London. And we work with European governments to transform digital services using a combination of startups and venture, digital transformation, service design, and research. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we think the GovTech opportunity looks like, a little bit about the state of GovTech in the UK and Europe today, and where we think some of the opportunities for startups in particular will lie over the coming years. So to us, GovTech is a broad term and really means the application of the same kind of wave of innovation, of agile delivery as we've seen in the public sector when it comes to in the private sector when it comes to technology transformation, and applying some of that to the public sector. So if you think about some of the sort of biggest areas that touch our lives when it comes to private services, you know, video streaming, how we access food and hotels and taxis, all of that has just undergone a complete transformation in what those services look and feel like. And we want the same approach to happen in the public sector. So of course, lots of that means that we'll have new models of delivery, especially from startups and scale-ups, and that's one of the things we're really excited about, opening up public services to the same sorts of players that have disrupted the sectors in our kind of private lives. But it means more than that. It means a kind of constant working with users, constantly finding feedback and iterating and improving services, again, as we see in the private sector. A kind of commitment to adding new features, shipping new products. Again, just the same levels of quality and standards that we'd expect in the private sector, touching some of the most important services that we access through our governments. What do I think are some of the biggest kind of opportunities and trends that are affecting GovTech? I think after COVID, there has been a huge rethink of what digital services should look like. both in health, but kind of anywhere where we engage with government. There's had to be a fundamental rethink with what the kind of access and quality of those services looks like. So I think after COVID, we'll continue to see new models of healthcare delivery, new forms of remote care and consultation, but we'll begin to see the kind of digital first approach that we've had over the past 18 months applied to every kind of interaction that we have with government. A second big thing that we're seeing, especially in the UK, is citizens are becoming increasingly interested to understand how governments are using their data in this kind of digital first world. And particularly important is the kind of transparency of the use of algorithms and AI, particularly at the point of service when they touch our lives. So going forward, I expect governments to be facing a big challenge of how they can more effectively use data and digital services to improve citizens' lives, but do it in a way that is transparent, open, accountable, especially when it comes to the use of algorithmic decision-making.
And now I'm delighted to introduce Katrine Holten. She's director at the Digitalization Department at the Norwegian Digitalization Agency. Welcome, Katrine.
Hello, and thank you for having me. In Norway, the government says that Norway should be a global leader within the digitalization of public services. And our aim is for digitalization to make public services better and more accessible, simplify processes. We should make doing business in Norway the best and most efficient place to do it, and we want to make it easy to create value, and we want to make everyday life easy for most people. In order to achieve this, the Norwegian government decided to merge our spearheads within digitalization into a new digitalization agency. We deliver common services, we deliver common components, we try to make it easier for all the agencies in the public sector to build services. We also try to make connections between the public sector and the businesses. We advise in regulatory matters, and we do standardization and architecture. The people living in Norway have a high level of education. They are quite digitally mature. And also we have great infrastructure. We have broadband all over the country, even on the mountaintops and in the most narrow fjords. And what we have done also is that we have collected data for a long time. We have the business registers and the people's register. And that's really important because then we know who has which ID, if it's an organization or a person, and we also know who is working on behalf of someone and can do something on behalf of them. That's one of the advantages that we have in Norway and that we have been trying to spread the word about all over the world for several years. We have cooperated with China, lots in Africa and in everywhere, I think, just to find try to establish that kind of infrastructure that we have.
Now let's dive into the opportunities that Johnny and Katrine have identified and some case studies of success. First, over to you, Johnny.
Sometimes people don't really believe us when we say that startups and scale-ups really are transforming public services around Europe as we speak. I think government still has a kind of reputation for being quite old school, wedded to a certain type of supplier, but it really is the case that waves of new companies, some of which have been founded in the last 18 months, are now delivering some of the most important critical public services in different European countries. There are a litany of potential examples I could give for this, but a couple in the UK that we've seen recently that really kind of drive home the point. First, given all of the kind of resource and sort of exhaustion constraints that COVID has placed on NHS hospitals, but also just all healthcare authorities, there have been massive new demands on resourcing, on staffing, on how we can make sure that we get the right doctors and healthcare professionals to treat people in a completely unprecedented healthcare environment. And a great UK company called Patchwork, which again is a small startup founded in the past few years, has created a a staffing bank of locum part-time doctors who can come in and meet short-term NHS staffing requirements much quicker, much cheaper, much more efficiently than kind of the old practices of going through agencies. But they've also developed a really modern and beautiful staffing kind of rotoring system, which again means that if you are a NHS care provider and you have to immediately decide and figure out how you're going to staff provision of care for the upcoming week, they have a solution that's as easy to use as Uber, but as I said, it's really transforming a very important part of our lives. A second example relates, in fact, to one of the most used public services in the UK, which is the Department for Work and Pensions Find a Job board. It basically publishes all of the job opportunities available in the UK. This service was traditionally delivered by a large international recruitment company. And a few years ago, a small startup at the time called Adzuna came in, and they have an AI-based solution that scrapes every single job posting from around the world, aggregates it into one place, removes all duplicates, and they've created and delivered that service for the UK government. So now a small company, which a few years ago didn't exist, is now delivering one of the most critical and important digital services that's accessed by millions of UK citizens every year. So I think this really goes to show that GovTech is not just a kind of theoretical concept, but is really something that is happening around Europe. It's happening in a very tangible way, and pleasingly, in our view, happening in an increasing way. And we're seeing more and more of these stories in kind of every single European country. Now, these startups really do still face challenges, and in many ways the playing field is stacked against them. There are, I think, three big problems that every government has to think through when it starts planning about how they can open up access to digital services for startups. The first is to think through its approach to procurement. It's no secret that traditional procurement rules can really act as constraints for startups, both in the kind of nature and length of the sales cycle, but sometimes in the different rules and evaluation criteria that are imposed. So we'd really encourage every government to think through how its procurement approach is affecting the ability for startups and scale-ups to get involved. The second, we think, is knowledge. It's really difficult as a small company, especially one that might not have a background in working with government, to understand where the opportunities might be, to at the first place, identify what the kind of front door is to work with government. So I think anything governments can do to make sort of those routes in clearer, to support startups and scale-ups, to see how they can make a difference. We saw this most acutely during the COVID pandemic, when thousands of startups and scale-ups in the UK asked the question, we have a solution, how can we help? And sadly, there wasn't a kind of obvious front door for how they could help. So I really would encourage governments to think through what the first kind of touch point and point of access looks like. And then the third point is legacy technology. And sadly, this is a really difficult one to solve. If you have historically worked with a small number of legacy providers, and you're sort of baked into a partnership and a technical infrastructure that's quite difficult to wrestle out of, legacy can be a really big problem. And we've seen this time and time again. Often the best thing to do to sort of create the opportunities for startups and scale-ups is to rethink what that legacy environment looks like and take a cloud-first approach to make it easier for some of these new companies to jump in and participate.
Thank you, Johnny. Let's now hear from Katrine.
Also, we have done some great cooperation. We have the Altinn platform that all the public sector can use for making services, mostly for businesses, but also for private persons. And we also have Altinn as an open source platform, so everyone can use the platform to build service on top of it. And now also Altinn has been called digital public goods. So for all the world to use and reuse. It's not easy to make what we want to make. We have strict regulations. That's a good thing, because it's kind of, you know what will happen and who will use your data and which data you can use and what will happen the next time. It's a problem if we want to digitalize, because it's not easy to share data. Also, we have a lot of silo thinking. I think almost all the developed countries have that kind of silo thinking, but in Norway we have 17 ministries, we have 356 municipalities, and they have a large degree of autonomy. So how do we make all this work together? That's not so easy. Also, we have this line principle, we call it, where the ministries and their agencies work together, for instance, inside the health sector, but they're concerned about how to make health good. And then you have the finance sector. How can we cooperate with the banks and security and tax administration? But they're not so concerned about what they're doing in health. And you know, people and businesses, they do both health and tax. So we try to turn the public sector upside down to not to have the silos just demolish. Some lessons we have learned so far in doing this is that doing business in Norway is quite easy. You don't use much time on tax administration or all kind of reports. We do that quite efficiently and also digital, and you can use your own systems doing that. So we know businesses in Norway has had a lot of cost savings on that the last 20 years. I think also there will be a lot of opportunities for private companies if they want to come to Norway. We have high level of trust between businesses, government and population. For instance, we use Bank ID in our single sign-on for all public services. We have the DSOP cooperation, where we work with the finance sector, bank, insurance, and so on. And also the work and welfare administration, the tax administration, the police, and we are in that cooperation. That makes us do some really new things that regarding how we cooperate. For instance, we have launched a consent-based loan application where you can go into your bank, your online bank service, and say, I want to have a loan here, and the bank asks you, okay, is it okay if we get your information from the tax administration? Then they get it directly into their systems and can do and you can get a loan in kind of only a few minutes because they have the information they need and they do not have any more information than they need. That's some of the things we do in cooperation with the private sector. We also try to use new technology. So we have done some initiatives on blockchain. We have established a blockchain for a shareholder book that will be launched this autumn. Also, we try to go into event-driven architecture. The goal for us there is to have people and businesses in the center. So the public sector should just know what is happening, and when something happens, you do something, and then you need some information, we will give it to you when you need it and not before or after, and you shall not have to go and look for it. Also, we have a great cooperation with a Norwegian innovation hub called Digital Norway, where we use the data factory. What we try to do there is to take all the data that the public sector has collected for so many years and give it back. And make it possible to use it for making new services on top of all that data, and also try to make it possible to use AI on top of it. And we know that in Norway we have a lot of small businesses and they don't have all the competence that's needed to do these complicated technical things. So that's why we in the public sector try to help them and say, okay, we can have some of the competence, we will do everything we can to have the infrastructure for you so you can do business on top of what we have of data.
A few questions to you first, Johnny. What is your advice to Norwegian companies that would like to participate in the GovTech transformation in the UK?
We hear this all the time, and companies always kind of come to us and ask us about how to sort of navigate the UK government. I'd say it can be quite overwhelming, it can be quite sort of intimidating, but the UK is really actually one of the most open international governments when it comes to its sort of supply base. We work with companies around Europe, Asia, America, so there definitely are opportunities, is my first piece of advice. I'd say maybe three things. First, really do your research and really understand the department, the agency, the council that you're working with and what their problems are. It never really works if you sort of try and shoehorn a solution where there's not really a problem. Second, engage as early as you can in the procurement process. Sometimes we see companies who maybe see a tender, maybe see an opportunity and think, oh great, I'm going to bid for this. And my advice would be to be a bit cautious there and to maybe try and engage as early as you possibly can in the process. And the third is especially for the kind of first opportunities, maybe try and work with existing suppliers who already have contracts, who already have partnerships in the UK. If you're there and your networks aren't particularly strong and you don't really know where to go, a great thing to do is to find the companies who do have some of those relationships and see where you can add in your platform or system.
This is great advice. And where did you see the biggest opportunity if you look at the European GovTech market going forward?
There are loads. I think the first thing to say is, the digital transformation that we're seeing across European governments is still quite early. So even if, as we say, at least a 105 billion euro market, we think it's increasing. So almost everywhere you look, every sort of sector, there'll be opportunities. I think there's two things that across Europe seem sort of particularly relevant right now. One is a kind of new approach to digital identity solutions. So if any companies who are working in digital identity and assurance, in creating trusted public services, I think that's going to be a really big trend. And then second, of course, is what the kind of future of our digital services will look like after COVID. That means new models of healthcare delivery. It might mean new ways of proving movement and status. So those would be two areas I'd particularly look out for.
Yeah, that's certainly very exciting. And finally, what are the main differences between the countries that you experience when you're around and talking to people? And what do you think in terms of the European countries? Do they have any common strength when it comes to GovTech?
There definitely are differences, and they're sometimes kind of difficult but always interesting to find. I would say there's always differences in different approaches to public-private partnerships. I think the UK tends to have quite a permissive approach to public-private partnerships. We see especially startups and SMEs playing a really big role in the GovTech transformation. There are some European countries where that's a bit less the case. I think there are big differences between citizens with respect to their attitudes in public services. Mentioning the UK again, it seems like the UK is sometimes a bit more wary about governments using their personal data, whereas some European citizens are a bit more comfortable with it. So it's definitely a really interesting thing for companies and governments to think about. Where are the differences and where are their commonalities? I'd say every single government has its own kind of framework, its own approach to digital services, its own version of agile delivery. I think our perspective is that when it peels all away, it is always the same. So it's really useful for companies and governments to kind of try and understand where there are common approaches. Procurement, of course, is somewhere where there's real strong sort of European integration and approach. So it really is the case that selling in France is exactly the same as it is in Germany. And I think that's a big strength of the European ecosystem.
This sounds really exciting, and thank you very much, Johnny.
So Katrine, welcome. It's great to have you here. You are the Director of Digitalization at the Norwegian Agency of Digitalization. That's a great title.
Yeah, in the world's most digital country.
How would you describe the state of GovTech in Norway now?
I think the state of GovTech, we don't talk so much about GovTech because we talk about tech and we talk about Go, and Go is tech. So I think Norway is really mature. We have mature inhabitants. We have really good technology competence both in people and in businesses. And we have a high level of education. And we have really had a lot of technology in Norway for many years because of oil and everything. So
we've been impressed at Innovation Norway at some of the flagship projects in the public sector. Could you share a couple of examples of some recent happenings?
Yeah, we have several actually. I think maybe not so recent is the EID that we have in Norway that I think everyone more than 15 years old, they have the common EID. And that's also built on a cooperation with a bank business. So we have a bank ID in that one. And that makes us have a single sign-on for all public services. That's great. We have the Ultim platform. That's a platform you can use for all kind of services that you're going to build. We have also a lot happening in health tech. So yeah, there's some of them.
The government recently released a white paper or a digitalization strategy. What are some of the highlights of that strategy?
I think the most important in that strategy is the live events that we are now launching, that we're working on. Because that turns public sector upside down. Because now we try to put the business or the user in the center and we say, okay, we have to make the services around them. That makes us think across the silos. We can't think health and tax administration. We have to think across that. We have to have event-driven architecture, because if something happens, you should have something from someone. I think also we will need all the competence that we can get from private companies, as well as people working in public sector, and also from abroad actually. Because it's kind of turning public sector upside down. And
yeah, that's a really good phrase, I think. I think this concept of a life event can be somewhat confusing, but would this work in the way that if you give birth to a child, then that automatically generates a school place in 7 or 6 years, and kindergarten application, and
and health care that you need, and the social welfare that you should have because you have a child. And we also know then you have to have permission from work to be at home with your child, and everything that will happen. But it's not only for private persons, it's we have doing business in Norway as a live event for businesses. From starting, doing business, and then when you have to cancel your business. Also for private organizations, voluntary work. We have for death and the things that happen when someone gets really ill and then they die. And lots of things have to happen all around the place. So that's really kind of different ways. But I think it's not that big difference between a private person and a company actually. They have kind of many of the same life events.
But this turning upside down also poses some challenges in terms of privacy or sharing data across many players. So how do you deal with privacy or GDPR?
Yeah, it's really important. It's the most important. We talked before about trust, the trust that we have between the citizens, the businesses and the government in Norway. And if we share data that we should not have shared, then the trust will fall immediately. So it's really, really important that we keep the data where they should be and not share with anyone else. One thing that is complicated is how to inform you what data we have in the public sector. We are working on that. That's a project we are doing. Also, we try now to look at the digital assistance. Also, how can we assist you in everything that happens? But then we have to share the data, and how will we make you know what data we have, what we use them for? And also when we talk about algorithms, we make decisions based on data and algorithms, and you should be able to know, why did I get this money? Why did I not get this money, for instance?
So there's a lot of development going on.
A lot of development, a lot of thinking.
One of the tasks of Innovation Norway is to take fantastic GovTech companies abroad, introduce them to new global markets, but also to attract both investors and companies to Norway. So if an investor or a GovTech company looks to Norway, why should they seek out opportunities here?
We speak English.
Yes.
That helps. We can talk the same language. It's a really not much bribing. It's transparency is good, and I think in the public sector we have we always look for competency because we know the public sector should not have the best competence in every way. We have to look for where someone is really good at security, GDPR, regulations even, technology. We can't know that, so we always have to take in companies. Also we try to use open source. Yeah. So that make what we do in the public sector, make it available for businesses to make services on top of that. So I think it will be several opportunities there.
I think a great environment for GovTech.
Yeah.
In general, right?
Yeah, right. And also if you think of the Nordics,
yes.
Because we have Norway, that's only one small country, but then we have almost the same culture and language as Sweden and also Denmark. So if we want to try to do something in one country and then you can try, okay, how will this work across borders and so on, you can use the 3 Nordic countries as a test bed for that.
Well, it's great talking to you. Thank you so much. And more importantly, thank you for the great work that you do in the government in creating a platform also for scaling GovTech companies from around Europe and not the least from Norway itself. So thank you very much, Katrine, and good luck.
I hope you all have been inspired and energized by the enormous potential within GovTech in the near future, and that you are ready to explore opportunities here in the United Kingdom and in Norway.
And I wanted to thank you, Ambassador, for hosting us today at the Norwegian Embassy in London and for taking part in the discussion. And again, to all of you participating today, thank you very much, and please feel free to contact us if you have any further questions.